Alright, I've moved on to the passenger side. I've already shortened the leads that were on the lamp. There's not a lot of space behind the tub on the passenger side of a 2005 because of all the emission stuff that sits back there. So I have to try and keep this fairly short when it feeds through, and it's going to have to go in and make some weird angles. It's not going to be as easy as the driver's side, that's for certain. And since my other set of quick strippers had broken off, I had to go into Harbor Freight, grab some grommets anyway. I got a new set, or the Quins, so I'm going to go up to the blue post, which is currently set at a 1/2 inch. You can see it's variable where you can set the strip length here. I would just do a couple of these at a time. Or maybe just one at a time. Why doesn't want to grab on the white? There we go. So I'm all 4 stripped. Twist them up. I don't know if I need to, but it's just habit. Seems to make them feed easier into the little Deutsch barrels that I'm crimping these onto. And this will be the female side of the connector. So I will grab 4 of the little barrels that crimp over the wires. Doesn't really matter what order to start in. I can see the copper through the little witness holes, so I have stripped enough. Move on to the white wire, which on these is in fact the ground. Again, you can see the copper through the witness hole, seated in the crimper. And they're nice and tight. The black wire is actually the tail light connection. And then finally the red wire, which is for the stop lamp. And then I took a picture of the way I wired these on the driver's side. So pin 1's red, 2's white, 3's black, and 4's yellow. So next step, I'll grab from the kit the next set of actual connectors I'll be using. I just ordered a 3-pack of these on Amazon. So, got my male side, female side. And I also already put my heat shrink tubing on here. It seems to be easier to pull the rear seal plug out of the connector to put the wires through. So again, I'm going to have red will be the top right, yellow will be the top left, then white will be on the bottom right, and black on the top left. I'm going to pull these things through a way so it'll be easier to feed them into that connector with as much wire as possible to grab on, then this will just slip forward on. Now that we have them exposed, I'll feed the red and the white in. And just go to here, snap, and you can see the pins protruding on the edges. I will get the black and the yellows in here. Just heard both of those snap into place. Then I will grab my retaining clip, which holds the seal at the front in place. Snap that in. And the tail light itself, now, short of pushing the rear seal in, is ready to go. So we'll make sure that is firmly up in there. And we've got the passenger side tail light assembly ready to go, short of hitting it with the heat gun, shrink up the heat shrink tubing. I'll probably try and center that up a little better to give it a little more flexibility. I'll grab the heat gun and we'll get that sealed up, and then the tail light is finished and ready to go in. And just like that, passenger tail light is ready to go. So I'm going to set it aside. Next up, we'll work on the factory wiring harness, getting the same assembly on the other side of it, and we're ready to get this thing bolted on. Now on the passenger side, just like I did on the driver's side, I'm going to leave about 1 inch of the factory wiring here. This side does not want to give up much extra, so I'm going to be pretty tight for space. I'll have to get the scissors and cut that back, so I actually have some exposed wire to work with. And my scissors have gone missing in action, so I'm going to grab my flush cutters, see if I can nibble back in here a little bit, peel some of that factory wiring away, go a little bit further, and I'll go ahead and strip each of these that same 1/2 inch. I think that's quite enough on that one. Get a little bit more off of there. And the first thing you may notice here is from the driver's side to the passenger side, there is a difference in wiring color. We still have our violet and black and yellow. But on this side we have the brown, which will be for the stop lamp and the right turn signal. And then with the phone being one of the most handy tools there is, it says brown and red. Let's see, does this one have a red stripe? It does. So I've got brown and red is a tail stop turn signal lamp. Black yellow is the actual tail light. And then violet and black, like on the other side, is the backup lamp. So you'll see I've got an extra pigtail hanging out here. This is for the Rock Hard 4x4 license plate relocation kit that I put on. I'm wiring this at the same time as the Metalcloak tail light. And I also have one more lead I'm going to have to fish down to power my backup camera when I'm actually in reverse, because the power lead on it takes off of the backup lights to power the camera. So I am going to strip these a little further down. I'll strip the wiring sheath as well, like I did on the factory one, to get some extra room to work with. When I've got all the wires set and ready to go, I'll put some heat shrink over all of them, bundle them together as one, and then they will have to feed in to the rear and then make the turn and go over to the side to have room for the connectors that are going on because of the emission stuff. As right in it, like first knuckle joint deep, I run right into the backing assembly for the evap canister and the other emissions bits. All right, after crawling around into the Jeep, it looks like if I locate this offset more to the driver's side, you can see where I get a center punch indicator right there. If I drill here, I have room to put a grommet in, fish my wires through, and it should make for a lot cleaner install on this and still be able to get the wires down to that hole. I'll probably have to put something through to pull them, like a coat hanger or a stiff piece of wire, but I should be able to get it back there, fish it out back, as I have to source the power for the backup camera from the backup light, and I also need a ground, which I'll also wire in with the ground for the tail lights. And then the camera wire itself, I have an extension cord for, which will drop through the same grommet. I will tie it to the third brake light and license plate light cable, loom those all up together, and then attach it to the rear framework of my swing out tire carrier. But before we can carry on, we got to make a hole. So at the moment, I have a very short drill bit chucked up, so I don't go too deep. I just want to get through the metal and then see if I can take a look at what's underneath before I go further with the bigger bit. So I'll grab my light. So much of it I can get in this rear hole. You can definitely see the light from there, so it's got a pretty straight shot. So next I'll grab a step bit and we'll make a slightly larger hole. And the idea here is to not make any larger hole than I absolutely need to. And the wires I have to fish through are fairly small, and I do have a grommet kit to put on as well. So let's go to the second step here. Nothing appears to be directly in line with it. So we'll continue up on the step sizes, and there is plenty of clearance behind this. We'll see which step I ended up at with and see which grommet I've got that will fit. So I got a little bit more to finish this step. We got first, second, third, fourth, fifth step, and on my bit that is a 7/16. So I'll grab my grommet kit, see if I got one that corresponds with that. If not, we'll go up until we find the next one that does fit. For my grommet kit, I just picked one up from the local Harbor Freight. 180 pieces, multiple sizes. And on the indicated drill size for this hole is 7/16. I did have a grommet that should fit. The wires I have to feed through. This is the lead for the third brake light. So it will, I think, fit through the grommet with a little persuasion, but maybe not, so I may need to step up to the next one. Nope. It fits through. I'm probably going to have to put the grommet in after the wires are in place. And then for the backup and ground assembly, I've got two other ones. One's already got a ground attached, but I'm going to also attach that to my taillight ground. So I'll clip that off. So I've got a small set of wires to get through here to clear. This one will fish up underneath with that license plate relocation bracket, and then become the quick disconnect on the other end for the backup camera. Then the assembly that'll set inside the Jeep, I'll leave back up in the corner, and we'll let it hang there and do its thing. And it looks like I should have plenty of extension cord for the backup camera. So with this plugged in, I'll go ahead and clip the wires here, feed these through, fish them out, This one will drop out the bottom, come up under the tub, between the bumper and the tub. These will go through the brake light mount hole and attach to the wires I'm getting ready to do for the Metalcloak tail lights. So I've got the end clipped off that came with the kit, so it will now feed through the same grommet, and then this will be the amount that actually remains in the Jeep. The other option is I step up to the next larger size grommet where I can feed the red end through and heat shrink those two together, but I think I'd rather keep this inside for now. So it'll get bundled up, tucked back underneath here. The factory tailgate mount has bolt threads protruding in. I'll run a dye over those to clean the paint off, and I'll put a little wire mount to hold them back in place nicely. And then this will be the forward feed to the actual backup camera on my head unit. So to start this off, I'll start by just dropping the extension cord through. See if I can get it to drop out the bottom by chance without having to go do a lot of fishing it out. Then I've got the power wire and ground for the backup camera. So I'll see if I can feed it back here and by chance feel it with my finger and be able to fish it out if I'm going to have to run a feed wire through to get a hold of it. And it's starting to feel like I'm going to need to grab a feed wire. So I'll find a coat hanger I can use, another piece of stiffer wire to fish through there as a fish line, and we'll get this in. All right, the way things go, after fumbling around into the Jeep a bit, I do have enough lead on my power and ground to fish them around and snake them up through with the license plate and third brake light harness. However, my extension cord here on the camera may end up being a little short to give me some slack in it for when the gate shuts and closes. So I did actually order 2 lengths in my extension cord. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this back out, put the 6-foot lead on instead of the 5-foot extension, and that'll give me enough to make all the turns, get it mounted to the gate without having it be excessively tight. So back out the camera when it comes. And we'll grab the longer lead and get it plugged in here. And actually, thinking about it, I'm going to go and pull these as well because they don't all fit through that grommet at the same time. Again, these cameras with this 4-pin connector do at least make it easy to get a somewhat custom length wire pre-pinned, which is nice. So now I'll go to my 3-meter cable. I do not do metric conversions in my head very often, but I'm thinking that 3 meters is a lot more than 6 feet, so I may end up with some excess. Yeah, 3 meters as I expected is more like 9 foot, but that may end up being a blessing in disguise. Get it back through the grommet. This one has a lot heavier connectors on the ends as well. So on the adapter side, go ahead and get these connected. We'll verify that the other end does in fact fit my camera lead, because that would really suck. And it does. So this will become my quick disconnect that sets up on top of the spare tire carrier, right next to the quick disconnect for the license plate light and third brake light. So this is the end that's going in. I'll take my power and ground leads, fish those through. Fish the rest of the extension cable through for the backup camera. I'll drop my power and ground back through the little hole. Then I'll be rolling around back into the Jeep to fish these things out. Pull the camera lead from on top of the bumper. This wire I'll fish through with the license plate light assembly. And I want to make sure I can get everything in wire loom, because with that emissions stuff mounted underneath on its steel brackets, there are some sharp edges to overcome. Then we'll see if there's, when we're with all the wires through, we'll see if I got enough space to get this grommet into this hole. I may have to grab a pick to give it a little persuasion, or a flat blade screwdriver might be the better choice to keep from actually poking through and hitting the wire. This seems to be a common theme of every Jeep project I've done lately, is you're going to need a lot of patience and extra time to do it well. All right, I think this side is done. So again, these wires I'll just tuck up underneath. And tie them off with one of the tailgate bolts to hold everything cleanly in place back here and get it all wire loomed up. That'll be when I actually wire up the backup camera though. For now, I'm more concerned with getting the power and ground ran to it. And this extension cable so I can reach the top of the tailgate and the top of the swing out tire carrier for that camera connect. All right, so I managed to get my coat hanger through to the bottom. So now it's time to get back under the Jeep and start looming some of this together so I can pull those wires up with the split loom on them when I pull them. This is the underside on the passenger. You can see here we have all this emissions stuff bolted in. This actually connects to the fuel tank. And right above it, if I can get my fingers on it, is my backup camera lead. I just have to try and see if I can fish a little bit of that out. Maybe hung up on something, so I'm going to end up having to back some of that out on the top side to get a clean pull on it. I can't quite get my hand up in there to grab the power wire. So I may grab a hook to snag it and get it back to the bottom here. But yeah, this is the kind of space you're working with. There's not a lot of room. Idea is my camera lead comes out, wires up on the third brake light and license plate light wire. Then the other end here will snake up underneath where I got the coat hanger running through around the frame and straight up to that exit hole in the rear for the tail lights, so I can get everything wired in. Not a lot of room because of all the emission stuff. So it took a little effort even to get the coat hanger snagged down through here. So with it through though, it should be easier to pull, but I just got to be able to get my wires down. Otherwise I'm not going to have nearly enough lead for my camera light or the actual power wires. So back up top to pull the camera extension cord through, and that camera extension cord does feel like it is firmly hung up on something, so I'm gonna have to get up under the fender, see if I can track down where it's hung. It is a mess up under here. All in the name of emissions. So I think at this point I'm just going to go ahead and pull the whole emissions piece out. I think I don't have really any other decent option for wiring the stuff up in here. So if it shows up here, you got the massive steel plate that holds all this in. Looks like 3 bolts up top to loosen everything up, and it should slip forward the way it looks. So I'll grab some sockets and we'll get on this. Looks like a 13 mil gets those, and I'm hoping that there's room to get my impact driver up under here on these, because I know they've been on there a long time. first one out. That one I'm definitely not going to be able to get to without an extension. Alright, the nut come off of the stud. Easy enough. Third one came out with no problem. There is one electrical connector. I'm gonna have to get up under there to even see how that thing clips on, because I definitely don't want to break the thing. I'll grab my tool to pop out the retaining clip for it. Get a pick and see if I can get up under there, and it may be easier if I can just slip the whole thing out to disconnect it. It's got a little bit of extra room on the wiring harness. So I'll grab an extension so I can get to that rearward bolt. And that one's going to be difficult. I'm not even certain there's room for a ratchet head, but we're about to find out. Should at least get the ratchet on there to loosen it up. All right, I got the third one out. Oh, look at that. It looks like the plate may actually come off of that. Well, just removing that plate alone gives me a lot more room to work with. Here's my power wire. You can see the camera extension cord. But I don't think I can see it and feel it at the same time. So I think there's one more bolt that holds this assembly in place underneath that just kind of clamps it down and the thing slips back into. I'm going to see if I can loosen that up, go ahead and get this whole assembly out to get more room up in there to work. The third bolt, you can see right here at the top, looks like it just cinches this down, that mounting plate down on part of the tub. So I'm going to see if I can get that one loosened up. If I can get it loosened, the whole thing should slip out the front. And it's not going to work without an extension again. And this time I'm actually going to have an extension. There's no way to get a good angle on that bolt. Back with the universal on the long extension. And I hope it's not hoping too much for it to be the same size as the others. Appears that it is. Now all I got to do is be able to hold it on there, get the thing loosened up. It does appear at least that it's loose now. So now I'll be back to getting that pick so I can get the electrical connector loosened up. All right, I got my trim tool. Let's see if we can pop out this clip and, if possible, maybe keep it reusable. If not, I ordered a kit of these for this very thing. There we go. All right, I got it popped out. I think it's going to be reusable. So now, let's see if I can get this connector to actually disconnect. Man, what a mess this thing is. And this is welded in, so this part's not coming out. So this whole assembly has to somehow slip out the front. Again, nothing's quite as fun as working where you can't really see and touch at the same time. That being the case, I may just see if I can just let it set where it is, fish my camera wire back up through the top and finish everything, then get this back in place afterwards. It does look like slipping that forward is giving me enough room to work back here. Hopefully. So I've got my camera wire fed through. I still need to get this wire fished back up through, and also have my power wire for the backup camera, which came out the front side. So I'm trying to see if I can reach in and grab it and pull it out rearward and drop it through the same entry. Which again would be a lot easier if I could get this whole thing out of here, but it's a mess. And I really don't want to get it out for fear of not being able to get it back in. So I'm going to see if I can get another wire And I think I'll pull this one out and see if I can put a little hook on the end of it, because it's going to be a lot easier to get down through here now. So I can grab hold of this wire and pull it out the same opening. I do have one fish rod. This is for home electrical, but it has a hook on the end. So I'm going to see if there's even a slim chance I can get it in there to hook that lead wire and pull it back out. Not going to be able to film this because I would need 3 or 4 hands to do so. So I'll set the camera to the side. Try and do as best as possible here. And I was able to grab a hold of it. So that's at least back here now. I can work with it. Should be able to drop it back down through so I can fish it now back up with the other wires for the connection. Again, the limited space back here, man, is just unbelievable. At least here I can kind of see where I want the wires to go, and lighting it from underneath makes a lot of difference, at least in visibility for me. All right, now you can see I got my wires. So I've got my backup camera extension line. I've got my power source that'll come off the backup cameras to trigger the backup camera. And I have my wire that will be the feed lead for the license plate light off the tail lights and the third brake light. So I'm going to tape these to the coat hanger and then gently pull this all back up through there. But before I do, knowing space is tight, I'm going to try and feed this red wire over the existing factory wire loom. To give myself as much room as possible, there's a body washer right in here. I'm going to take that extension line for the third brake light, license plate light, and bring them around it. The camera light will go in reverse around it and back up. So I can pull it back over the top of my bumper. I'm going to do the same thing with it though. I'm going to try and bring it on the other side of this existing wire loom. So I have to try and reach up there and pop that thing loose. And this should give me all the line I need to get this thing ran finally. All right, so I should have a straight shot now to get everything up there where it needs to be. Camera light, go back over the top of the bumper and behind the hinge for the carrier. So if I can get that kind of fished back through there for now. And if you remember from the top side, these two are pretty much paired together. So what I'm going to try and do when I get this done is run some split loom over both of them and feed it up there to where it bottoms out on that grommet. And that evaporative stuff, when it comes back, is going to more or less compress all of this, including this little pigtail, which you can kind of see is almost torn through some of the bits of the connector on it. I get out of the line of the dirt and see if I can tuck it on the other side of this wire loom and gives it a lot more room to hang down here. So it should get it out of the path of all the emissions bits. So I'm going to bring our wire here around the coat hanger. Maybe we'll get the power wire that we were pulling back up that way for the backup camera. And after we get this all snaked out, we can get onto the 10-minute section of this project. Really want to have to crawl back down under here, so I'm not going to spare the tape on this pull. Sure got plenty of cable play here. And you can see I got it taped up here. Should pull cleanly. Finally have those out, but now I'm noticing that I've lost the factory wires, which may be the piece that I gave a little more freedom. So it's gonna be going back under to try and get those back up top here now. So it's just the way these things go. But until I get it snaked back out though, I am leaving these things taped on here. Do not want to lose these wires back under there again. I can see the factory wires. So I put the light underneath. Oh, look at this. Look how much extra wire I was actually able to free up too. Now the question is, does that evap emissions clear when they're this high? But for now, I'm going to go ahead and get everything wired up. We'll deal with that after the fact. This is where my projects will overlap a little. I've got the license plate relocation wires for a third brake light and license plate light, complete with their ground on the gray lead. I have my backup camera wire lead is the black and red. So that's ground, and then the red will go to the backup lights. Then I've got my factory wiring. So the idea here is get all these paired up where they belong, get them in those Deutsch connectors, get that plug end on there, and then get the Metalcloak plate mounted back on the back. So I'll go ahead and untape my fish line here. This job would be a lot simpler without all the evaporative emission stuff that sits back in that corner. This would have been done hours ago. All right, now right now I'm going to need to trim this back. I think about my best option is going to be to grab a razor blade and just try and slit that down the side a bit, see if I can get that peeled loose. I'll just go with real shallow cuts until I know I'm through the outer core on this. Oops, that's definitely through the outer core. So hopefully I didn't nick any of the inners and take the insulation off of them. Scuffed up the insulation on the red, but the others look good. So getting back to my little flush cutter here. See if I can get some of this outer shield cut away. Then these wires are tiny enough because the LEDs draw very little power. I end up breaking out the traditional strippers here. Yeah, 20 gauge wire, it is tiny. I think what I'll do is strip a little in excess, get them all together and try and get my 1/2 inch cut this way. I'm going to leave a little extra. All right, so we have stop lamp, we have license plate, and we have ground. It'll be the same thing here. On the backup camera, these are going to be 18 gauge. At least on my backup camera they are. Try to cut them at about the 1/2 inch line. Then we're back to our factory connector. Since I have the extra space to pull, I'm going to. And I think I'm going to cut this outer shield back a little bit more. So that will give me a lot more room to work with these new connectors that are going on. So the factory lights do not come with the ground lead. Again, they ground off of a backing plate that's all metal in the factory tail lamp assembly. So to run my initial test, I'm going to make my ground lead feed it back through so I can test each of these independently and make sure everything's functioning the way it should before it's all back in here. And it appears the only ring terminals that I have are the smaller gauge, which is okay for the wire, but they have the tabs inside to lock them in place. So I'm going to do a little hunting around here. If I can't find some, I have to run down to the parts store to pick some up. I did find one that's a smaller 16-18 gauge. Actually, it's 18-22 to use for my ground. So I will get my wire stripped down, we'll get it crimped, mount it up, run our initial test, make sure everything looks good. But on the other side, I probably gave myself about a foot of ground lead. This will come back out through the hole. The other side will go back in the interior into that plug, which is going to need some space due to the whole emissions bit. So probably cut about a foot here and call that a good amount to use. Take about a 1/2 inch off. I can see the wire right at the end of the crimper. And that feels good and tight. It is not going anywhere. Since this was the factory ground points, I'm going to go ahead and attach it here. And that should give me enough ground to test the lights. Won't really be able to test the backup camera, so I'll assume it is good. I will be able to test my license plate light and third stop lamp. And to get my power for those, I'm going to turn on the park lights. Tail lights are on, so we can now test these and see if we get stop lamp. So there's third brake light. It's not super bright, but in dark it's probably a little brighter. And license plate light, you can see it's clearly on. So that ground connection is going to work just fine. So I can turn parking lights off and get back to wiring these things up. And I may yet have to go to the parts store to get actual 18 gauge ground wire, as I do not know if I'm going to be able to get multiples on this ground on one of those pins. 18 gauge is a wire size I don't normally keep a lot of on hand, since I have 3 ground leads feeding off of the same wire. Did come up with some 18 gauge wire. Now I got to be on the hunt for another ring terminal connector that will actually fit that small wire. Found plenty for 16 to 14. But did not turn up one for 18. So if I can't find one, I'll be back to the parts store, but at least we know the wiring's good. I need to be able to fit the 2 tiny wires onto the ground wire when they go into this pin. So I will start by cutting a couple feet of 18 gauge lead for our ground wire, just as soon as I can find the end where it terminates. That should be more than enough. Then I will be stripping it probably a little longer than I need. So I can get these all cleanly ran as one wire into this connector. And these are some fine stranded wires, that's for certain. So I'm going to take my 3 different sets of wires here, bring them together, try and get them all cleanly twisted into one. And I can already tell these things are going to be a pain to wedge through that weather tight seal on the rear. But they do fit in the connector. So I'll do my best to get these cut to depth where they will seat in this. Make sure I have all 3 of them. And I can see copper through the little witness holes, so I'm going to go ahead and crimp those down. And our grounds at least are all now 1. Probably going to get some heat shrink tube, a small section to put over this, and try and see if I can make them a little more solid. I had a piece I found already cut. This should be about the right length. Maybe. I need to cut it down a little shorter. All right, I got a small section to heat shrink over these. I'm gonna hit with the heat, lock those wires together. Now I have the 3 extra wires hanging loose here, and it's gonna be backup lights, stop lamp turn signal, and my license plate light. Only this time around, when I'm connecting them, I only have to get them wired in with the factory wires. So the brown on the factory is the stop and the turn signal combined. And I can see the copper, so that one's ready to crimp. And I'm going to do the same thing with it and put just a little bit of heat shrink over it right behind where those wires join to help lock them together. And that might help it feed through the plug as well. Then next wire pair, I will take my factory tail light and bring the license plate light in with that one. Get them twisted together as solidly as I can. You can see copper through the witness hole. Grab the crimpers. They're now locked firmly together. Just give them a little section of heat shrink to slip over that. And then lastly will be, I probably need to pull a little more wire Ready to strip this one just a little further back. This will be for the factory backup light, which I have found mine to currently be shorted. But that will be a future project. Let's take my backup camera power source lead and bring it together. With the backup light signal. Cut it back to about a 1/2 inch. Grab another pin, then get all the copper started in the connector. You can see copper through the witness holes. We'll grab our crimpers. And they're nice and solid in there. Grab another little piece of heat shrink tube and we'll get this wire. I'm going to try and get it right to the end of the pin, or right below the end of the pin where the other ones are. Now with our 3 leads all combined, plus the ground lead we added, if we can feed those through the pin, get our connector on here. And once it's in place, I'm probably going to zip tie these in a spot or two to help hold them together as a single bundle. And grab my phone, it's got my picture from the other side, so I can see where I pinned out on the opposite side. Ground is going to be going through the bottom left position. The tail lamp assembly itself will go through the bottom right. We will have the backup camera going through the top right. And then finally we will have our turn stop assembly going through the top left. And this is as viewed from the back where they feed through. So now that we have the wires all paired up in here, it's a matter of getting them into the actual connector itself. So I'm going to try and pull a little more wire through, just because it'll make it easier to get a grip on these. Then we can start to feed them in. So and with those bits of heat shrink on there, they should be a little easier to feed, I'm hoping. When we see they're starting to come in, just heard another one lock in place. Probably grab some needle nose to get in there and grab those and pull them in until they lock. All right, the top 2 are seated. 2 on the lower end need to come a little further in. This one's good. So we've got one more to go here. Which will be the ground that has the most wires connected to it. And it just snapped in place. So now I can grab my green plug and drop in there. And it's simply a little wedge that drops in. And we'll press it in. That locks all 4 pins in place. Then we can come back to the rear and start getting the seal pressed in, which is going to be a little bit of a challenge with the heat shrink tubing and extra wires, but it'll go. When we're done, this should be fairly weather tight. That is seated in there now all the way around. So now I can grab my zip ties to cinch this up, make it a little easier to feed back through there, hopefully, the way this has to go in with that emission stuff sitting right behind it. Grab the bundle here a little closer to the front. All the wires protrude individually. And we will go back just a slight bit to get over all of the ones where it's separate installation. We'll grab the flush cutters. Trim those off, edge free, and we're ready to test our lights themselves. So grabbing the tail light housing, you can see again we have white's ground on the light to ground, red is stop lamp and turn signal, yellow is our backup light, and then finally the black on the light itself will be for the tail light. One last final piece for this test to work properly. I do need to actually have the ground. The only small gauge ring terminals they had at the store weren't quite sure were going to work, but it looks like they will just clear the outer ridge of the bolt. So go ahead and splice one of these on there. See the copper coming out the top. I'll put our tooth on the back. And we'll make our ground connection again just for the test. And if all goes well, we should be about ready to start reassembly here. We'll kick the lights on, see what we have. So we definitely have functioning marker lights. Then next I'll test the turn signal and brake when it's set up higher so I can see from the front. Brake light is definitely functioning. I'll get the key on. We'll test our turn signal. It's working with the fast flash because I haven't changed the blinker out yet. And to recreate for the viewers, we have brake light. We have right turn signal. The only thing I don't have is that backup light. I say that's because I've sorted out the fact that I have a short somewhere that's going to have to be tracked down. And I'm not looking forward to that job. So now we can disconnect everything and get our Metalcloak frame on, and then get the wires tucked. I think after the wires are tucked in, only then I can start putting that evaporative emission stuff back in, because it's going to take every last bit of space. Again, I had about a fingertips distance, so this thing's barely going to clear. I'll start with my ground bolt here. We'll disconnect our tail light assembly. Next we'll be feeding this back through, mounting our plate on, assembling the tail light. But before I do any of that, I'm going to grab some of that quick detailer and clean off the 20 years worth of grime. All right, so I got the Meguiar's Ultimate Quick Detailer. And I'm just going to hose down the area where that factory tail light's been on there forever. Grab a paper towel and just wipe that goo off. Now that we have it all settled, and this side being potentially a little more difficult due to the emissions underneath, I'm going to go ahead and bring assembly up and rest it there. And what I learned on the other side was that depending on where these wires rest, which on this is on the passenger side, I'm going to want that ground either on the top or the inside. Otherwise it creates enough interference on the ridge here on the light that it doesn't want to set flush. So with it now in there, we'll make our connection. And feed that to the inside of the fender, because it doesn't leave us a lot of wiggle room down here to feed the wires through. So I'll start the top one with the ground on it. I'll get this top bolt started first, and we can start a lower two. And again, we're reusing the factory bolts on this. And with everything squared up, we can start tightening things down. And I'm going to torque these to just loosely hand tight. Except for the one with our ground connection up top here, I'm going to give it a little extra. Give it one last quick test now that we have everything back in there. Everything's functional. You can see the side marker well lit. So I'll turn them off and bolt it back up. All right, now we have everything locked down with the frame. I'm going to go ahead and slip the side marker light through. And then earlier in the video, I showed you where I enlarged the mounting holes on this very slightly so that I can actually get the tiny little screws, and they are tiny, and there went one, to line up on here. I'm hoping I got my holes enlarged enough here. There we go. Felt the thread start firmly that time. But if I hadn't elongated those, there is no way these things would be threading in this easily. All right, now I got things screwed in. It fits well. Didn't break off the little tiny screws. Again, that would not have been possible without elongating those holes both a little closer to the inside. Next step is to fish all the wiring back behind here as best as possible, and then screw the lens in. And on this side, Knowing how that evap canister assembly is going to wedge back in here very tightly, I'm going to try and get as much wire back through here as possible, which I think I may have gone as far as I can. The slots they put in here don't really give a lot of free space to work with. Then I also have a little bit of excess ground cable that will take up a little real estate, but I need to get that all inside of that machined out portion behind there. I actually need a little bit more of this out to try and get the loop around this bolt on the passenger side, on the driver's side. Yeah, the wire is still pushing it rearward, so this may take a little working to get the seat in there, but you know, eventually with a little patience it will. Which the back clearances on here are tight. See if I can get a better camera angle to kind of show you what I'm working with. So trying to get all of the individual wires that are in here to seat without touching those bolt heads, which will be a matter of basically trying to create a loop where they do not touch. I get the feeling these might end up actually touching the bolt heads themselves. Still not quite. Let's see how much it protrudes on the driver's side. Driver's side protrudes very little, so I'm gonna keep working at this to get it to seat in there well. I know it's coming back to these wires and the heat shrink. I'm just gonna go ahead and take my razor blade, see if I can trim some of the heat shrink away from this for the time being. Give it a little more flexibility right through here. But without cutting any inner wires. I see the inner wire, so I'll grab the flush cutter to get a spot started there and see if I can peel that around to the other side. And finally we'll cut off the last little bit. Let's see if we can get to set down flush in there now. So feed the heat shrink back through as far as I can get it to go. That thing still does not want to sit flush on there. All right, let's bring the wires back through. Let's see if I can get them to it's starting to look like the wires here are actually going to need to set upward and then compress more in the center section. All right, I'm going to do what I did on the driver's side. I'm going to pull the side marker, and that'll allow me to actually get a flashlight on the side so I can see in there and see what's interfering with the fit. And I know this kit, if you look, these holes are countersunk, but it did not come with any mounting screws that are countersunk. So maybe that's what would make the difference. I don't know, but I'll grab out the little flashlight and we can take a peek back in there and get a better idea of what's happening. It still looks like it has to clear those bolt heads. I believe it is absolutely going to be that inner bolt that is causing the problem. So I'm going to pull that one for now in the name of finishing this. Guys, it'll be pretty simple to come back. Call Metalcloak, see if I was supposed to have the countersunk screws to hold this to the body or not. But now, with that screw or bolt out, the thing sets perfectly flush. So that's the problem. Bolt head on this, simply too thick. You can kind of see how it stands out from the rear. On this side it stands out enough, it is actually hitting where the wires are siliconed in to the lens. Will not clear without that being countersunk. So I'll have to go to the local hardware store, see if I can find some that are countersunk, and if I can, it'll be a pretty easy job to get that extra bolt in there. But for now, I don't think 2 instead of 3 is going to make a huge difference. And in fact, I can probably get a little bit of my heat shrink back on the inside here, and it will still in fact sit flush. So again, just one of those little things on a project like this, you're never quite sure what you're going to run into. I'll bag this and label it as tail light housing, replace with countersunk, and then go to the store and see what I can find. And these snack bags are very handy things when you're doing stuff like this. I use them all the time. But since we know what the deal is now, at least we can get this assembly finished. Just a little annoying that for what this stuff costs, it doesn't include the pieces to make it go smoothly. Now it's still feeling like it wants to protrude a little on the bottom. That may just be the difference of that extra heat shrink coming through there. I mean, the clearances in the back of this thing are tight. I think that's actually what it is. To feed that back through the back, I think I'll start all 4 and then just ease up on them until they're good and snug. Otherwise, I fear this light is going to crack like an egg. And that is just fingertip tight. I'll do the same on this side. And then on the lower screws, we'll also go to there just fingertip. You can actually hear that thing wanting to give. Stands out a little on the bottom, and the driver's side is dead even all the way around. So I'll dig out my little pin light again, which batteries let out on it. But yeah, everything in there is super tight. It may stand out just a hair. Unless somebody comes along and runs their fingertip around it, they're not going to notice it. But I'll know it's off. That's what matters, right? So I'm going to try and tuck the little 20 gauge wires back in here for this side marker. They're basically going to be an accordion fold to get them back in there. I'll get my little screws and get them started back in. And on the pain to install scale, I would put these up there fairly high. I mean, they look good, but I'm kind of more about the functionality of them than sheer looks. These I'm definitely not going tight on at all. Well, 1 screw short, which may or may not cause a rattle, I'm not sure yet, on that one side. But I'm going to see if I can get the flush mount screw. I'll call Metalcloak support, talk to them, see what they say. Otherwise, it's looking good. Marker lights are super bright. The rears are not quite as bright. when you hit the brakes they are. So the lights are in. I still got to find out about a countersunk screw to hold where that third bolt would otherwise be, that would interfere with the wires and not let it even get in this flush. Next up, I got to get back underneath here now, try and get that whole evap canister back in place and set where it belongs. Then I'll have my other wires I ran with this for my backup camera and third brake light and license plate light on that relocation kit from Rock Hard. Gotta get those finished up as well. So I'm gonna cut for now and move camera around. We'll go back underneath next here, see if we can finish up that side. All right, I'm back under my Jeep. And knowing pretty well how my leg goes on these things, I'm putting split loom wire tubing on all the wires that will feed up underneath here as far as I can. So I'm just feeding it into the tubing and pushing it up as I go until it feels like it's going to start hitting some resistance. And this split loom tubing is the old stuff that pretty well will match the 2005 manufacturers, especially the Jeeps. I've got a tool to do this, but it's not horrible to do by hand either. So that's about as far as this one's going to go. I've got slightly larger tubing that when I pull these, which these being the license plate relocation kit wiring and the backup camera wiring, those will both start about here. I will go to a larger size loom so I can get both those wires in it. But right now this is feeling like it's about as high as I can go. I'll grab my other flashlight, stick it up in there so I can get a visual on it. There's no way I'm going to be able to get the camera to show what I'm dealing with, but it does look like it's gone up about as far as I'm going to get it. So I will grab my scissors, which I've laid down here somewhere close by, and go ahead and cut this at one of the notches. Then where it's cut, that'll be enough to go under the tub and around the frame here. Give it a little bit of electrical tape at the end to hold everything in place. Scissors again. So get a halfway clean cut on that. And this is where the camera wire, which is here, I'll try and do the same thing, feed split loom on it up as far as I can go, hopefully close to the grommet, and then cut it, and then we'll regroup on the two here through a single larger, I think this is 1/4 inch split loom, the other I've got 3/8. So if all of this evap stuff is slid forward, there's plenty of room to work with this. Once it's back in, I don't think there's going to be nearly as much room. So I think I've got enough split loom spun out here to do the same thing I just did on the lights on the camera line. Does not feel like it's wanting to go any further up. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it down here and try and terminate it right around in the same position. I mean, really, that's probably only a couple feet up in there, if that. I just want to give it as much abrasion resistance as possible. So I'll grab the scissors and trim it. Then grab the electrical tape and tape it. These two then are ready to go back up in here. I'll actually tape them together as a pair for now, because for the rest of the run on them, for my license plate relocation kit, with the addition of the backup camera, they will be loomed together all the way up. Go ahead and cut that. Now that I have them paired together, I'll hop up top, make sure I have in fact given myself enough free run. I managed to loop the power wire from one. Yay. There, now it's not looped. So I've got one more to get some split loom on, and that's the power for the backup camera. So that is plenty on the power side. What I found though is on the camera line, I'm probably going to want a little bit more. So try and spread one of these open. Oh, look at that. I got lucky on the first try. I'm going to pull some extra camera line down from above. Now, of course, I've taped those up. I'll have to untape them to be able to fish this through. That always seems to be the way it goes. But as I said, rather do it right the first time than have to go back and do any type of repeat on it. So it's a lot of trial and fit. And I'll grab the camera line and untape it, feed it back into the loom. I think for now, instead of taping this up until I've got my final run in, I'm going to leave it just hanging free. And I'll tape them when I attach them to the swing arm running up to the top. For now, we'll go and get the rest of the tape off here though. The big thing is I get the feeling once this evaporative canister goes back in here and bolts back in place, this stuff is going to be pretty firmly locked into position. Now for my camera power and feed line, I don't know how much wire loom I'll be able to get on it. I'm going to do my best to get what I can. It does look like I should be able to get some on there, so I will. Again, if not for that whole evaporative emissions thing parked right in this corner, this would have been a whole lot faster job. Probably would have been done 2 or 3 hours ago. It's just being a paired wire set, it does slide through the split pretty easily. I can almost see where it hits the bottom side of the grommet. I may already be there, so grab the light, take another look. It's getting close. Again, this is a job, if the fuel tank was in here, this would be a lot bigger deal too, because it has a connection to that evaporative canister that comes pretty much straight off of the tank. I think for now on this one, I'm going to go ahead and cut it. And the rest I'll just zip tie on here. It's sealed off up top. That's a small wire, so it should tuck in behind that evap canister. All right, I think I have my wiring to point where I can start trying to get this whole evap canister assembly back in here in place. And if I can get it in, that'll be about a wrap on this project. And of course, there we go. Bottom bolt now, the washer doesn't want to come down low enough to. There we go. All right, that lower bolt is slipped in. I'll have to get up top to see how the other ones do. Still feels like I have some play in my wires. So hopefully this thing is all wedged firmly back in place. It'll bolt back down without much fuss. So get the lower bolt while I have it slipped back in there. I'm guessing torque spec on it is not much, so that's about what I'm giving it by hand. And I'll get back under the inner fender to get the rest. You can see the split loom doesn't move quite as easy now, but I'm going to zip tie these to the existing wiring harness. It runs up underneath here to keep them from going anywhere. There's a trim piece that slides back under here as well, so that'll take up some of the slack. But for now, I'll get up top and get those other bolts in. And as you'd expect, one of the bolt holes does not line up. So I have to get under there. Don't want to just tighten down. It's going to have to be loosened back up. I think until that bolt hole is aligned. There we go. So the lower bolt hole, it is standalone. It does not have anything else holding it. So this bolt is a standalone on this frame assembly. I tighten it down first. I get my light to hold still. Then with that one in place, I can go ahead and tighten that lower bolt. And then the rest of it will be the cover plate. It simply sets up on top. I'll get everything started before I tighten anything down. And that final top corner bolt does require universal to get the angle on it you need. And finally, I'll take my little wire loom back around here, snap it back in. So all is as it should be. And I imagine I'm definitely going to want to keep inner fenders or mud, and everything's going to end up back in that area. But that pretty much wraps up underneath. Everything's back together. So we'll move back up top, make sure now that we've cinched things down, all the lights still work. So finally, I have both of the Metalcloak tail lights in. And you can tell natural daylight is fading fast here. But they're in, they look pretty decent. Still have to finish up that passenger side after I talk to Metalcloak on Monday. Being Saturday, I'm just gonna go ahead and assume they're closed. I'll kill the extra light here and we can take a look at what they look like. Well, I have both tail lights. That's a good sign. We'll hit the brake lights, see if they look good. I can see the reflection in the tire on the passenger side. I know it's good. Got my little extendable mirror here for the driver's side. Definitely looks nice and bright. So I would say if you're planning on taking on this job yourself, plan on it taking a little time. If you want to do the extras like I did with the quick disconnect. If you're going to stick just with the kit like it came, with the butt connectors, maybe not quite as long. But That passenger side, I'd probably almost recommend just doing some butt connectors and making it a somewhat permanent installation. But I did want to be able to pull these things out if I needed to for any reason. That's why I put those Deutsch connectors on there. And the kit, as delivered, comes with your standard little butt-end connectors. It's not going to weather seal. We'll get water and grime in there, so probably get at least some heat shrink to have on hand to put in place. But anyway, for me, that's it. That's my installation. It is finished. I'm going to wrap this one up. The only thing I have left to do is not related to the Metalcloak tail lights. And that will be bringing my wire connectors up on the swing out tire carrier to have my quick disconnects so I can pull the license plate frame with the rear view camera and the third brake light and license plate light attached for a tire change. But that can be for another day. So for now, thanks for watching. If you like this kind of stuff, reach down there, hit like and subscribe, and helps the channel out. And stay tuned. There'll be more things like this as time goes by. Thanks for watching.